So, what I'm going to do today is kind of just go over this track. It's called Remedy. It's a remix. I started about a week or so. It's for a remix contest. It's a Mago song. I really like the vocalist on it, and I knew I wanted to do something with it, but I didn't have a lot of time because it's due in basically 2 days at this point from now. So my mindset was, all right, well, let's try to get something down as fast as we can, see if I have, a direction I can go in, if I should even try to jump into the remix contest or not. And I came up with this. I'm pretty happy with it. It's obviously not a perfect track, a perfect mix, but for the time I was given, I can't complain. So first thing I'll do, I'll just play the track straightforward, and then from there I'll kind of go over the breakdown of some of the sections, some of the sound design, some of the effects, all that good shit, basically. I would say at this point it's done. I don't plan on changing anything. I don't really think anything needs to be changed, so I'm going to kind of leave it as is, and hope for the best in the contest. So I'll play the track. I'm playing it in a separate project that I just rendered, actually. Specifically because it's pretty CPU intensive. Once we get into the actual project, you'll see why. I have a couple bad habits that I should probably break eventually, but for now, I don't care. So I'll just play the track and we'll go from there. So this is obviously the waveform. Not that confusing, and this one is muted. I hope it's supposed to be. Yep, muted. Just so you can kind of see the spectrogram of the track, you can kind of see the spectral balance of it while playing it. So we'll jump into that, and I'll just let it go.
I wanna see the world through your eyes. I wanna see it all by your side. We're living high, we're living loud. Got our own pace, own ways. No need to follow no crowd, cause we don't have to choose who we are. Cause we can be it all. Your voice in my head, there's no regrets. Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down. Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down, 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 down. In my head, there's no regrets. Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down. Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down. Up
right? Well, yeah, I mean, that's it. Like I said, nothing probably crazy going on in the track. No crazy sound design, really, or anything too cool or too special. But I would say, at least for me, what I try to be when it comes to a track, especially one with such a short amount of time to work on it, is I try to be as almost cerebral during the mix down as I can be. So in this case, as you'll find out, I did the mix and the master and the composition all at the same time. So everything is being routed to, probably generally one of the side chains, maybe sub-routed into a bus, drum bus, for example. All the bass lines, the top bass lines are coming together. The vocals, there's a couple things going on in there where they're being routed, sub-routed, rerouted, and then side-chained to the original vocal. Play the beginning.
I wanna see the world through your eyes. I wanna see it all by your side. We're living high, we're living loud. Got our own pace, own ways. No need to follow no crowd, cause we don't have to choose who we are. Cause we can be it all. Your voice in my head, there's no regrets.
So that's just like the intro, obviously, only. So there's not a lot going on in here, to be honest. The master right now, as you see at the top, I'm using this for the sidechain. I got lazy, like I said, in this one. I'm not using like an actual ghost kick or ghost MIDI for anything. It's just LFO tool ducking every downbeat, every beat. So every quarter note we're getting that duck. In this case, for the vocals, top line vocals, super tight, but we'll look at those later. So what is it? It's the original vocals, obviously.
I wanna see the world through your eyes. I wanna see it all
without
by your
effects,
side.
because it's being routed.
We're living high, we're living loud.
Mostly dry. This is the one that I uploaded. I didn't really do too much with it. There's a little resonance here, not in the intro, later on in the vocals. As you can hear here, you don't really hear much until she drops down in her vocal register a little bit. So I wanted to cut some of that out to kind of level it a bit. Normally I do multi-band. I don't know why I didn't in this case, but I solved the issue good enough for me. The de-essers working especially on her S's are very sibilant sometimes in this track. It's pretty random, so this is going off.
I wanna see the world through your eyes. I wanna see it all by your side.
And if you just listen to the DS, you can actually hear it in action. So those are just a few samples. You hear how sibilant it is, almost too sibilant, obviously, that's why I cut it. It was pretty extreme. And obviously, it was already processed in the original song. I'm basically doing a mild reprocess where it's being ran through this chain, a couple other chains, and then pushed through everything on the master. So the de-esser's almost intentionally taking some of the top end away because it's going to get re-added back anyway on the master. I was almost doubling up on it with the exciter on the master, but that's just how I routed it in this specific mix because basically didn't have a lot of time to do anything with it. So
I wanna see the world through your eyes. I wanna see it all by your side. We're living high, we're living loud. Got our own pace, own ways. No need to follow no crowd, cause
so that's the compressor. It's not doing a lot of work. It's mostly for some of the transients, as you can even see in the vocals. If we look, obviously you can see some of them. I'm going to assume basically when these were recorded and processed, they had a somewhat of a loose attack on the vocals. That's why we have a lot of these throughout the mix. So I tried to tame that a little bit, and that's what this VC2A is doing. It's my favorite compressor. You'll see it on almost everything in this song, to be honest. It's my go-to. It just sounds good on everything. I had one issue with it, but it's not anything really noticeable in the mix. until I'll point it out later. And then obviously every time you listen to the song, you might hear it then, but it's not too big of a deal. And then transient master, cutting, once again, a little bit of the initial bite of the vocals. I wanted them a little more smoother, but I wasn't able to do much with it, so just tried to lower it slightly. And then the peak controller, you'll see what this is doing later.
I wanna see the
or
world
now.
through your eyes.
So when it plays the audio, it's actually going from the main vocal, and I believe that's the only one affected, yeah. So from main vocal, busing it to the FX, which is a mix of replica. So this is being kind of like the delay of the track, vocals, kind of a longer feedback delay. Valhalla Room just sounded good. It's on a lower percentage because normally what I would do is I would create a separate bus for delay and reverb, but I didn't want that much control, which almost sounds counterintuitive, but in this case, I liked how they sounded stacked on the same mixer channel instead of separated and then merging them together later on, which is normally what I would do. So normally I'd have maybe Vox FX reverb next to it, Vox FX delay, route those two to a channel together and kind of combine it there. In this case, we're also getting reverb attached onto the delay, which sounds cool to me. So I might be able to solo it actually. Yeah, I think I can. Let's find out. So then you can kind of hear what it sounds like, just the FX. So you kind of hear how it sounds kind of hyper compressed. That's because it's tied pretty fast to the main vocals. So the moment the main vocals come in, the reverb, the delay duck out of the way. So they're ducking out of the way for the main vocals to stand out, and they kind of rise back up once she stops singing. And you can actually visually see it, obviously.
I wanna see the world through your eyes. I wanna see it all by your side.
So it fills up that space afterwards. I have a compressor at the end. Oh wow, look at that, there it is again. Like I said, you'll see it a lot. So this is tying it down a little bit, kind of gluing the reverb together with the delay slightly. I'm going to guess, without looking, it's probably hitting between -5 and -10. Because normally in this situation, I can compress it a lot without it being a noticeable effect, without a pumping effect, specifically on these sounds. And then keep in mind, it's about a 4.5 second reverb, so it's decaying semi-quickly. So this is kind of sustaining how long it's, almost at its peak level. So you get a little more body, a little more hold to the reverb, to the delay, but obviously it's still ending in about 4.5, 5 seconds. So it helps a little bit.
I wanna see the world through your eyes. I wanna see it all by your side. We're living high, we're living loud, got our own pace, own ways. No need to follow no crowd, cause we don't have to choose who we are, cause we can be it all. Your voice in my head, there's no regrets. Remedy.
When you hear how busy the structure sounds just with that, just with the vocals and the delay vocals, it fills it up a lot, which is what I wanted, because it's a rather minimal composition in the sense that there's not a lot of crazy stuff going on. So then we'll move on from that, and this is, for some reason, I just threw both of these on the same playlist channel. Normally I wouldn't do that, because I like the control of seeing them separate, and then it's easier, obviously, to compare the MIDI. Didn't do it in this case, oh well. So, first one, Rhodes, not really anything crazy. You hear distortion, kind of a messed up mid-top end. it's pretty narrow too. I had it wider to give a wider effect, but then I decided not to keep it like that structurally, because there are other things in the mix that needed to be wide. And obviously, if I have everything spread out super far left, far right, it doesn't really sound varied. It doesn't really sound wide. Just like if everything's super loud, nothing sounds really loud. It's just a mess. So I kind of narrowed it down because of that. Strings are going to be on this sphere, probably. We'll get their nice pop-up, about up-to-date, yay. Yeah, so basic patch. I didn't really tweak this much. Just the FX, I think, added an EQ to basically cut the sub, and it's almost like a slight boost around 18 hertz because I have the Q basically slightly above the middle position. It's not doing a lot though. So yeah, that's that. That one's not really crazy. It's wide, as we can see, so it's basically spread as wide as I can get it without causing clipping. I'm sorry, not clipping, without causing phasing or any issues like that. This is as wide as I could get it. I'm probably going to leave this open so I can kind of show you guys some references. Because I'm a very visual mixer also. On top of what I hear, I always want to see, is it as loud as I want it to be? Or as loud as I can get it? Can I get it louder? Is it too loud? This was originally almost hitting -4 LUFS, so I actually did back off, where it peaks around -5, I believe short term, but normally it's around -6 during the chorus. So that's that, nothing crazy. And then the Reese. I believe this was something my friend Bound to Divide, or Jules, originally made. What I basically did in this case, I just added some movement to it. So distortion, basically, pushing it a little bit. But then on top of that, I have a couple modulators. Basically detuning it super quickly. It's creating this almost like tremolo effect. I use this a lot, this specific sound, but I'll always kind of tweak the rate of the tremolo. So this time it's really fast in my intent. So I got what I wanted out of it. And then the filter was something I also added. Same thing, it's just moving up and down barely. I think 5 or 6 units. So it's pretty narrow, but it creates variability. It's a wide sound for being a low-end instrument. This is basically replacing this sub. As you can see up here, it's not crazy heavy in the low end, but it's pretty low end heavy. Mostly it's the mids that you're hearing. I believe if I actually cut the low end, if for some reason I did that, you still hear all the width. The low end's actually pretty damn narrow. So you don't really, from doing this, doesn't really gain any width, because on the chain, master chain, you'll see it's basically summed almost 100% to mono. So this sound, nothing too crazy. These are keys, as you can see, I actually took from a vintage organ, I believe is what it was. And I rendered it out, so probably the only thing I actually froze, to kind of have a little less, or a little more headroom CPU wise. So first thing I have on it is obviously OTT. Not doing anything crazy. The main point of it is kind of just to exaggerate the top end of it, of the sound, which it did, and that's what I wanted. So, yay. So I did that, and then I believe the only other thing I did was another compressor. Yep. Mild compression. Basically everything that's not a drum, I try to compress somewhat before I get to the master. The easiest way, in my experience, to get loudness out of the overall mix is basically to have everything compressed somewhat. Unless you specifically don't want it, I would always compress it a little bit. I'm only doing 2-3 dBs of gain reduction here, and then no boost. So I'm really just lowering the level overall. I'm not adding anything back to it. So that sounds nothing crazy. This is just a background noise. Yeah, these are just ambiances. The only two you hear are these two. And then in ocean waves thing I found, this was like 2 minutes long, so I have this going in the background throughout the track just for nice ambience. Filler noise. This is moving left and right. This is pretty wide too. Yep, basically as wide as I could get it. Nothing too fancy going on there. And then that leads to the next section. So let's get there.
There's no regrets. Remedy to my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up. Can't keep it down. Remedy to my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up. Can't keep it down, 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 down.
So this is probably my favorite part of the track. Just because it switches so much from the intro. The intro has basically no energy, and then you get here and you know something's coming. Just from the bass line dropping out, and you just have basically the filtered bass, and then the snap and a couple build-up sounds. So, obviously the main thing that comes in is going to be the bass line. Looks like I cut the sub out of it. Everything's on this channel for the most part. And then I have normally, like I said, I wouldn't do this, but in this case, it was the easiest option for me. So normally I'd have each of these on a separate channel, basically, so I could see them all, but I just stacked them together to be lazy this time, to be kind of consolidate as much as I could. So in this case, this is what the bass is doing, filtering in and then reverbs out. And that reverb tail is really nice. It kind of leads to the transition, obviously, and then it's almost sustained. I feel like you have like this sustained note. You don't know what's coming next. We'll look at the bass design once we get here. And then this is just, I think, three layers of snaps on top of each other. So that's just a main snap down the middle with reverb added. So it has reverb on it. This second layer, what you're hearing, is I'm actually kind of using just to add width to it, as you can hear. So this, I'm just adding some side information, basically. Cutting the lows, boosting the mids, because it was very, very top end heavy. I kind of wanted to fit it in the mix better, so I scooped some stuff out and pushed it towards the middle. And then the other layer, just this is an ugly sound, doesn't even sound good. But I'm using it as kind of like a lower, obviously lower octave clap, basically. Then together, they don't really sound pretty in this context, but in the mix it works. Same thing here, this is just playing a sustained note. Nothing crazy there. And then we get a couple other things added in. So the string top, which basically plays throughout the whole track, starts to come in, and it fades in. It's being processed a little bit, so I'm cutting all the top end out, basically. Ugly sound. I think this was originally from Contact. I rendered it out. I use it in basically every song now. Pan Man. I don't use this too often. I always forget about it. I'm going to be honest. For some reason, I never even thought of using auto pan ever until about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And then I realized how beautiful it is. It saves me so much time. I'm just stupid, I guess, and neglected it. I'm still learning every day. So this is moving it left and right, basically every beat. And it's semi-fluid, it's somewhat fluid going left to right. And that was kind of the point I wanted. It's nice ambience for the drop, at least during the chorus section you'll hear, and then compressor. This one's doing a little bit of work, but not a crazy sound. Melville's still there. I don't know why I called that. That's what it sounds like to me. And then some of the FX. So we got 3-4 things, kind of like I said. I just throw shit on top of each other. For some reason, I just got lazy. Normally, each FX has the same channel. So reverb crash into impact with another crash right here underneath it. Then the riser and the build comes in. Goes into the chorus. So you kind of get the gist of it. Nothing crazy there either, and then we'll throw it all together.
There's no regrets. Melody, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down. Melody, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down, 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 down.
So this is actually really cool. I love formant shifting things. And the best thing I've found for it is Melodyne, at least quality-wise. It's not the easiest to get to work with. Normally what I would do once I had this separated is I would render it and then just throw it in the mix. I didn't do that. I don't know why. And at the point, eventually I just didn't care. So I kind of had to keep it where it is or move it around, but didn't want to do that. So basically, this is the formant control, and it actually just drops it a little bit. Oops, sorry, there we go. So I don't think we'll be able to see it because I'm using automation, but we'll check. But just repeating that down for 2 bars, pitching it down. Obviously, it goes back up afterwards, so it doesn't affect the rest of the vocals.
Can't keep it down, 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 down.
So that's it. Nothing too crazy. It's a nice sound. It sounds cool in the rest of the mix, I think. I knew I wanted to do something like that because I wanted a gap of originally 1 bar, which I expanded to 2, just so I could kind of emphasize almost the drop, longer a separation between the build-up, those 8 bars, 2 bars of nothing, except transition, basically, and then get to the drop, which is right here. Check it out.
Down, 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 down.
So that's that section. That's kind of like the climax, even though it's not crazy high energy. The energy that there is, though, is almost exclusively from the drums. But let's work bottom down just to simplify it for me. So vinyl, I kind of just added background noise to the chorus. Obviously, it's the loudest part, so you really want to fill it up as much as you can, the whole spectrum. I don't really want gaps anywhere in the in the mix when it comes to this, so I want it as wide as I can get it, with things going from straight down the middle, working my way outwards until I get as far left and right as I can. Same thing from basically the sub-bass range all the way to 22 kilohertz. That was loud as fuck. Alright, anyway. So, vinyl, yeah, so I added vinyl, kind of background noise. Fucking truck. Shit was loud. So I'm actually using a different compressor for once. That's what it sounds like before. Loud. This is doing a lot of work. Kind of let some transients speak through. It's kind of a cool sound though. I like how it worked in the mix. Waves thing again. This is like a party effects. There's like a clap, people cheering. So this is going on in the background. Kind of like a party ambience. It was good noise for me. And then the crash. This goes throughout the song. Comes in and out basically, mostly for every 8 to 16 bars I use it at basically the start of a new section. FX crash, I use this all the time. It's my favorite. Love how it sounds. I use this in almost every song. I don't know why. It just sounds good. We already know what this is. String top. Same thing as earlier, just louder. So nothing going on. This is a new one. So this is the ARP. I have one of the basically ARP kind of things I have in the background. So it's kind of playing the root of the progression, and then on top of it's just cycling between that A sharp and C. I like how it sounds. It's deep in the mix. It's far back. It's kind of plastic sounding, but I liked it. There's not a lot going on. I'm basically cutting all the attack, so it doesn't really cut through the mix. It is being reduced a lot. Yeah. So that's loud. And then basic EQ, nothing crazy. This is pretty wide in the mix. It's not an important sound, so even if it went out of phase, which it doesn't, so that's good. Even if it did, I wouldn't really care, is basically what I'm saying. It's not important enough to the track to matter in mono. And then on top of that, we get back to this sound. So first 8 bars, it doesn't really do much. And then it drops in level, and then it just basically plays this drone throughout the whole track. So the whole chorus, we're basically just hearing this in the background. You hear this basically top resonance a little bit cut through the mix, especially when you play it back at louder levels. And then this is kind of the louder, more, I would say it's more important to the mix for sure. I don't know what to call it. Basically, it's kind of an R pattern still. So all I really did for this is I added a filter, basically cut it off, so we only get that transient really coming through. OTT, that's what it sounded like before. So that's a big difference. Before and then after here. So we're really pushing up this high, and you're really hearing kind of a click. It really cuts through. It sounds nice. It's almost competing with the bass, not nearly as loud in the mix, but in the background, towards the tail end of the bass's release, this cuts through pretty well. So it fits where it needs to. And then here, I'm going to assume I have a low cut. Yep, big dip. There's not really a lot going down, so this is probably more of a safety thing. And that's just a little bit more of the clip. So I cut it here also and cut some top end out. This one, this is as wide as I could get it basically, also without causing any phasing problems. So in mono, as you can hear, it sounds basically the same. Less room, obviously. Reverb might not sound as loud, but it's not important enough to the mix either. And then this actually is one of the bass layers. So I'll do that. I might as well do it now. So this is a bell sound from Atmosphere also. And by bass layer, obviously it's not layered with the bass or even processed with it, but it's basically a bass layer. It's playing the same thing. That's the intent for this, was a little bit of that low end pad sound to kind of fill the sides of about 200 to 600 hertz. And then the top end, obviously, you hear a lot of that sizzle, a lot of resonance. I loved that. So I wanted to use that. I had to narrow it a bit because it was pretty wide in the mix. This is another bass sound. This one's not really that important. I could cut it out of the song probably and it wouldn't matter, but I liked it in between the main bass noise. And it's just that. That's all it is. So if I take this off, that's what we were working with. It was just a simple FM bass where I cut the transient and then rendered it, shaped the waveform so it sounded more wobbly with some cutoff. But then that sounded too clean, especially in this mix. You wouldn't really hear this cut through the mix how it is. So I had to kind of mess it up a little bit, and the order of this actually does matter in this case. So that's before. You hear this, that makes a pretty noticeable effect on the width of the track, of the sound, and then distort it. So it's widened, and then I'm distorting it. Yeah, so go back to how it was before. Mild difference, doesn't really probably matter in the context of this mix since it's not a major sound, but whatever. So this one's interesting. Also Omnisphere. I'm not 100% sure what this was. It's out of time. Like the whole time it doesn't even sound like it's actually playing anything. It's faint, it's quiet. Beautiful. I use that a lot for the side-end information for the bass. Kind of give the background something to do, something going on. So I use this plug all the time. Another thing, just basically copying the bass line. So I use this in I Want You. So it was like the main bass sound in that track. This is obviously a lot less compressed because it's not the focal point, but I'm still running it through OTT. Not a big difference. Top end sounds a little bit smoother. I kept it dry because basically all the actual effects I wanted to come from the main bass line, which it does. So the main section has 3 layers. The top one, obviously, is this one's doing most of the work. If I solo the first oscillator, you get a lot of side information. And the main sound is this. This was, I think I found this on Splice. I think it was like a progressive pluck, like progressive house pluck. And I was looking for kind of like just fat, ugly bass sound, which I was able to turn this into that. Super fast, basically filter cutoff, and kind of just let the transient cut through, and then it drops everything else out. FX wise, EQ. This is taking out a specific pitch that was constant. You should be able to hear actually if I turn everything on and then I solo it. You might not be able to hear it, but it's pretty piercing. You can see it cut through a little bit, especially up here. It's kind of like a lone resonance point in this sound, and then the sides I cut 2 dBs exactly actually out of the sides. It felt a little overdone, so I want to get that out of the way. OTT's doing a lot of work. We're going from that to this. Low depth though, so it really beefs up the sound. Obviously, this compressor, because I use it for everything. It still lets the bite of the bass through, so we're still hearing the bass kind of bite. The transient's still cutting through, which I love, but it's taming the rest. And then this, I'm actually adding even more, it looks like. I did this pretty late in the process, the mixing process, and then a slight decrease, nothing really important. You do see here, though, I'm cutting all of the sub out of it to make sure it's clean for the actual sub bass. And then the very top end above 16 kilohertz, it looks like, yep. Because if you look up here, we might see it. It's downsampling. It's not crazy noticeable solo. It is downsampling, which gives it a nice sound. Almost fattens it up a little bit, but it does have that side effect, so I minimized that as well as I could. Dawn bass. This is a patch I made for a track also with Jules, About to Divide. I think back in November or December. It's a while ago, actually, at this point. So I kind of took what I made, I spread it out a little bit, a lot of it looks like. Yeah. So that's an ugly sound. This is kind of pushing it down a little bit. I took that, I spread it out as much as I could. And this one is going over a little bit randomly, but nothing too bad. So it's okay, I can live with it. And this is the sub. And I like how easy it is to control the parameters I want to. In this case, I have a slight pitch bend on it, so the initial hit is actually higher than the root note that it ends up playing, so it's doing a really quick sweep down, kind of like an 808. But it doesn't sound 808 because it's a lot quicker, first of all, and it's going through a lot of distortion to kind of just basically brick wall it. So if I took everything, I'll take the LFO tool off also. So you can hear now, it punches through pretty well. This kind of fattens it up. This fattens it up even more. I love camo fat. So before camo fat. After. It really emphasizes those harmonics, and like the 250 and higher is kind of what I'm using camo fat for, which is mostly what I want to avoid. and I do because I end up cutting it, as you can see. So that's what it's adding. This is basically just ugly noise, so I cut that. And then the sidechain is here. Normally I would sidechain after routing it, but there's a reason I did this, which I will explain in a little bit. So those are the main layers of the bass. And then we also have the Rhodes come back in. It's playing the same thing it was in the intro. Boom, nothing special. And then we get to the acapella, the start of some of the acapellas. So this was from the original track as well. I love this sound. It's so fun. It's so playful. So I have this jumping in and out every 4 bars, and then another one I use in basically every song now. I love that sample. So you hear that, and then you hear this later on. Especially, I try to keep it going a lot during the main part of the chorus with the original vocals, which come in here. There are 2 layers.
Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down. Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down.
These are processed on a different channel than the main vocals during this chorus section because I wanted it to sound different. I wanted a little more raw, less processed than before. So I added reverb directly on it, 13-14% to kind of muddy it up, and then I'm compressing it. So I'm kind of gluing the dry signal originally with a little bit of the wetness, pushing it together. It kind of sounds kind of not so pretty. And then it looks like I'm just getting rid of a specific resonant. Yep. I cut through way too much. So nothing really crazy with that. This is the same vocal, just pitched down. I did this for spectral reasons. Without it, the vocal sounded kind of thin on top of the rest of the chorus. So I wanted to add this in to kind of give it a little more body, basically. I could have done that probably by EQing the original vocals if I had, let's say, for example, maybe a boost down here, 200 to 500 hertz, let's say. I could have probably played with it enough, yeah, to boost this range. I could have done that, but I didn't want to. It just doesn't sound good, so I went with this route.
Melody, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down.
And they're both bused to the same sidechain, in this case a vocal sidechain, super tight. The reason I did this is because I don't really want any audible ducking in the vocals. I want it to duck only when the initial transient of the kick hits, and I was able to achieve that. As you can see, I don't obviously cut it all the way, whatever, doesn't really matter to me, but it's cutting so quick, so deep, you don't really notice it in the mix at all. Obviously soloed you do.
Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate.
You hear a couple things kind of get cut off almost. It sounds a little bit choppy. That's okay, because in context it doesn't. And that's what matters. I don't care what something sounds like on its own. It could sound like me singing. But as long as in the mix it does its job, that's all that matters. And this is just a copy of this repeating, kind of like almost like a refrain. I'm using it as a response, a delay basically, to the first phrase of it.
Down, down. Remedy.
So just filtered out.
Down, down.
I could have done it with delay. I don't know why I went this route. But, you know, it serves the same purpose. It does what it needs to. And then the best part, I'm going to focus on, don't really need the intro drums for the chorus because there's nothing crazy going on there. It's just the kick and the top kick, as you can hear. The top kick, super clicky, noise, nothing special. So I took that, I OTT'd it, I did a lot of, that's what it was before. OTT really cleans it up, tightens the top end, and this is removing all of the low end. We hear the claps come in. As you can probably hear, there's reverb on the claps, yes. This is on the mix, if I take it off. See if we can solo that. It's subtle, not even 1%. It's there to kind of have it blend in with the rest of the mix. I added this pretty late. I do this almost every track, but I didn't want to do it this track for some reason. But then I kind of was listening and I realized, oh wait, hold on. I do need to kind of blend it in a little bit, make it sound a little more flawed, a little less like a super clean sound, kind of muddy it down a bit. So that was the purpose of that. It's super subtle, but I love how it came out. And then, at least for me, when I'm working on a track, it's kind of make or break depending on how the drums sound solo. I like it. In this mix, I'll play it real quick. I'll start 2 beats back. Yeah, so nothing crazy, basically generic house beat, right? Normally I'd want to vary it a little bit more, especially the claps. It's literally just claps on 2 and 4. Normally I want a reverse clap or a filler every 2 to 4 bars to kind of break how stagnant it sounds, but they're not really the focus since it's a vocal-centric track. And I didn't feel it was something that would have really pushed the track to a new level. Sometimes the variation, over-variating, is counterproductive, at least in my experience. So I was not having it. So some of these layers I'll go through pretty quickly here. Obviously the kick. This is just one of my kicks I made for my sample pack. I had an EQ on it originally to cut this out, but it caused a couple issues elsewhere, so I didn't want to keep it. I'm kind of just boosting it, almost lengthening the kick a little bit, lengthening the body of it, kind of fattening it up. And then I had LFO tool to do a mild duck in case there was sound there, but there wasn't, so I didn't need it. But I never deleted it for some reason. And then a slight cut on the top end because the sample I added some super high noise, and they liked how it sounded at the time. Now it's hit or miss. So with the top kick, this is kind of just there for some width. The ride that comes in later, this is just filler noise to me. I'm using this as a white noise substitute. It's not crazy loud. I cut a little bit before I boosted above 14, 15 kilohertz because there was some kind of ugly sound there, so I wanted to cut it out. And this is the sidechain specifically for this sound. Simple enough. This was a shaker loop. I narrowed it. It's going to the drum bus, which I will show you in action later, in a few minutes actually. This is kind of literally, I added this also last second for noise, to kind of get some more variation without it being inherently obvious. So in the whole mix, that's not really noticeable, but it adds a little bit of energy. So this is my right-leaning top hi-hat. A lot of resonance was in this one. And low noise. It's kind of muddy, a little dirty sound. But I like it. This one's one of my favorites. This one almost has like an audible pitch, but I don't have to repitch it every track to fit in the mix. It just happens to sound good, basically wherever I put it. So I love this one. As you can see, I'm not really doing much besides low cutting and cutting a little bit of the top end. This one's ugly. This one's actually ducking underneath these two. As you can kind of hear, this one just adds noise, cutting some top end, but then also adding a little resonance with this. I'm kind of boosting the key point almost, make it sharper. This one has another, it's G. G note seems to be everywhere, so I cut it from here again too. Must have had some issues with that. This is something I use often too. I use it in Dawn. I've used it in a lot of tracks, Can't Stay, a lot of things. It's one of my favorite sounds. I use it just for pure width, for whatever hi-hat sound I have. If I spread this as far as I can, which is 0 basically, correlation without it phasing, it just sounds so good. Solo, it's ugly, obviously, because you just hear it super far out, but in the mix, it adds a lot of width. This one I also added late. I felt like there was a dip in the spectrum for the drums where they didn't feel heavy. There was the sub bass, and then there was all this high end in the hats, and nothing in the middle. So this was kind of added to kind of fill out that mid range. This one, I think I added the LFO tool to kind of cut the intro a little bit. I could have done this probably easier if I just manually edited the sample, but I chose not to. And then the EQ again. And then the claps. This is one of my favorites. Yep, so it's one of my claps. Not really much processing. Another one I'm boosting the mid-range in that one a little bit. And they're all routed together. So they're all going to this clap mix and then to the master. This one I added, same reason as I had that lower hi-hat sound, just for some body in the track, some mid-range. And this one I added really late. This one's just wide for noise. It doesn't add much to the clap in context of the mix. As you can hear without it. You hear it a little bit, but nothing crazy. And then the processing for this is the EQ's going crazy. Most of this was done today, so this is getting a low point. This, I wanted to boost the mids even more. They didn't feel sold to me yet, so I wanted to boost them a little bit. And then this is getting rid of some just nasty buildup. And then this, same thing. The initial click of the hats was, or of the claps, was a little too sharp for me. The reverb, obviously. This is doing some work. So this is before. They sound fine. Now they sound big. I think without the compression, they sounded more natural, more of a natural clap. This one, they're obviously fit for a specific mix. It gives it even almost more of a thump to me is what it sounds like. It's actually a little bit quieter, but because of that compression on the tail, it actually sounds thicker in the end. So I think the level actually dropped, even though I added a gain to it afterwards, but I love how it sounds. And then I do have some more side chaining going on with the clap, just to cut it a little bit out of the way for the kick when the kick hits. Most of the claps come in a little early, as you can see here. So this is just making sure the kick gets what it needs to in the mix. It needs to stand out. It needs to always be the clickiest, punchiest sound, which it is. And then a couple other things I added. These are just filler drums, noise, cowbell shit. This is so ugly. Doesn't sound good on its own. But it works in context. And then everything together again. Finally. So the big thing to take away here, actually, I have most of the percussion on this drum bus. So if I mute it, everything that's routed to it should kind of disappear. So most of the hi-hats. So the important thing here is, this is a little trick I learned actually from listening to a lot of tunes by like EDX, Northern Pure. A lot of the percussion is actually, and even vocals sometimes, is side chained to the bass line. So when the bass hits, everything in its way kind of ducks. Now obviously you want the bass ducking to the kick, because the kick's more important in this mix. But after that is the bass line, which means everything else besides the vocals that could interfere with it, with the clarity of it, has to move. And that's what's happening here. So that's the reason I have this LFO tool on the sub bass instead of on the sidechain mixer. So it's actually ducking before it gets to the sidechain. And then I basically have what I'm using, the P controller, to duck the drum bus. So if we look at it, I'll go forward a little bit, and I'll make it kind of an extreme example. So you kind of get the concept behind it. It's basically just ducking it a little bit to give us more room with the vocals, or I'm sorry, with the bass to kind of shine through the mix just a little bit more. It sounds fine without it, but it gives the bass a little more loudness, which means I can kind of get more out of it before getting to the master channel, the master chain I have set up. So I'm actually getting more loudness out of the mix from doing that, and it kind of like the pumping effect it gives on the drums, the percussion. You hear a little more of a groove in them, even though it's only 23%. It's ducking basically 3 or 4 decibels, but very quickly. It's very tight. And then we get to the next section. It's basically just the chorus still, but simplified. And it's basically just the verse. I believe what was the vocal verse. I called it vocal verse, but I called everything that.
We could have it all we want. No need to compromise by your side. We were born to run, never far from done. We got the door now. Just keep on hearing the sound, 'cause we don't.
So I do this often. Basically, just take the ride, pitch it down, use it as a transitional effect. Nothing crazy. This part's not special. It's literally just a simplified version of the chorus. I cut some backing information out, but it worked. And then we get to the next.
Hearing the sound, 'cause we don't have to choose who we are, 'cause we can be it all. Your voice in my head, there's no regrets. Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You
So same thing as basically the first section, the pre-chorus. Almost exact same. Except, actually not at all. The only thing I carried over now that I look at it was basically the snaps. But they're so, like, I'm focusing on them so much, and that was kind of the purpose of it. So you kind of almost want to snap along that I'm not even almost focusing on anything else at this moment. So it's actually carrying the intro sounds instead of the pre-chorus sounds. So the chord progression and the re-space. But now I'm using it in the pre-chorus instead of the verse section, basically.
Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down. Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down. Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up.
Oh, poor computer. So if I hopefully can minimize some stuff, make it stress out less. Once we get to this section, I've used this twice now. This is something I made originally for a remix I did for Crosstalk. I think yesterday was the name of it. I love this sound. You hear it drop. You think, all right, I'm getting an impact. Comes right back up in that last beat. And then that transitions right into the low end of the rest of the mix. As you see, so it's kind of a nice little trick. This one's only a measure compared to the 2 measures I did in the first transition into the chorus section. Just because I didn't want to do the same thing. I didn't want to use the 4-inch shifted vocals twice. So I just did a cut up of basically what she says on the downbeat.
Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down. Remedy, you're my favorite.
So that's that. If I get rid of the vocals, it still sounds pretty full. Leads us into basically the 16-bar outro. So even that didn't sound bad. It sounded full for the most part to me. The vocals are kind of just sitting on top, doing almost like a chant, where they're not really, I guess, important to this part of the mix. But I love them. I love how they sound, so I wanted to do that. I'm actually using 2 different processes for the vocals here. The first half is the normal chorus vocals I had that were not reprocessed. Obviously the low end pitch is, but beyond that.
Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up.
So it's not triggering the vocal FX. It's not routed there. These ones are though. These ones are a little more processed, so technically the sound is different. But for me, it wasn't bothersome, so I just kind of left it as is. So let's see what this one looks like. This one's routed, so we'll hear the delay, the FX kind of fill up when the vocals duck. So this part's probably a little bit louder, actually, in the first 8 bars.
Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down. Remedy, you're my favorite melody. You keep my heart rate up, can't keep it down.
Yeah, it's not working. Poor CPU. It's doing the same thing as the initial build-up FX-wise. So same sounds. then we get to the outro, basically. So this part of the outro carries over the same chord progression before it all drops out. So I kind of just filtered out elements, obviously kind of a generic outro. So the pluck. You hear the top end kind of disappear a little bit. It's kind of tightening that. This one obviously is just completely gone. I think for some reason, is this the routing for it? No, that is for the pluck. So it would be this. Should be there actually. And same thing with most of the drums. I actually think the clap, this is tied to the clap, and the sidechain ends. So you hear it filter out a little bit. Yeah, it's not extreme. Cowbells, I don't think filter out at all. I just let them go because I love them. And then this does the same fade out, down pitch, but over 8 measures instead of those 2 at the end. This is a small transitional thing. I've been doing it since Then I Did It. I did it and then I did it and then I did it in everything else. And I love the sound of it. I don't know why. It's kind of ugly. It's a lot easier now in FL 12 plus because of stretch function. Before, I think I had to use like Quack Quack or even Ableton. I had to go in there, take the 8 bars or the 2 bars, the 4 bars, and manually do it there, render it out, bring it back to FL. It was such a pain in the ass, so thank God it's simplified. And then everything else, yeah, is basically it. The song kind of just ends. It doesn't end on a sting. It kind of just fades out. That's it. Nothing too complex, nothing crazy really. Like I said, going on in this mix, it looks messy. I keep it semi-organized. I try to color everything that's not a drum or FX. I try to keep colored, just because I've always done that. So I know, I see this and I'm like, all right, that's a bass line. Where's that? Normally I have melodies as like this purple. In this case, I did the plucks, because normally I use plucks as the melodic element in a mix. So real quick, let's go over the master chain. A lot of people quote master their own work. I'm not saying I'm the best at it or I'm great at it, but compared to what I've heard, I'm generally able to get the most out of a mix. And I'm not sure if it's from me mixing well or if it's from this. Because when I start a track, I generally always start with something on the master. In this case, I only had ozone. And when I had ozone, I only had the vintage limiter initially to just cut some peaks. So I'll work my way up. So we'll start with Pro MB. And I'm going to do these 8 bars because hopefully it's the most note. Now let's do these without vocals, just so you can kind of hear the way the drums are shaped. So I split it into 4 bands always. First 3 are doing normal downward compression. Last one, I'm basically doing upwards. I'm pushing anything up there even higher. So low end, it's pretty loose. It's not that, well, for EDM, it's loose. For any other genre, this would be a pretty tight slope. But in this case, it's a looser slope. I'm bleeding a little bit into the mid-range, as you can hear. And most of what's ducking is the kick. If I turn it off, and then back on, off, on, You hear a little bit of shaping of it, probably in headphones, maybe monitors if you're listening to them loud. It's giving the kick a little more clarity because it's letting a little bit of the attack through, but not a lot. And then a small increase again on the output, not really a lot. I probably didn't even need to do this because if I needed the makeup gain, I would have just done it on the individual channel probably. Mid-range, low mids. We'll do 2 measures on, 2 measures off. So, again, it's not crazy noticeable. You can see it actually working. You can see it ducking probably mostly the kick, the clap, maybe some of the hats, certainly the bass transient. Yeah, you can see it ducking for the bass. Not as much as for the kick, though. This one I let the attack be a little bit looser because I wanted some of those transients to still cut through, and then so the attack's kind of loose, the release kind of tight still. I think it's a little bit looser than here, yeah. But I kind of wanted a nice, I guess almost fade out from the multiband, so it didn't just sound hyper compressed. Because if I put this at 0, as you can see, at 0, it's literally the moment it stops going past whatever I have this set at, negative 6.5 dB. The moment it drops below that, it stops touching it. And I don't really want that. That doesn't sound smooth at all. And this is kind of more groove oriented. So I kind of had to keep that in mind when I was doing this, had this going output. So what I basically do is I try to put the output on. I'm basically pushing it again. I'm trying to basically add what I took away with the makeup gain. So basic leveling, and the great thing about this is you can see both. So without, you can see how it's a little bit louder. It's almost the exact same. So the peaks is basically what we're saying. The peak level is basically the exact same. Technically, the overall level is louder because we're compressing this frequency band and then using the makeup gain to kind of put the peak back where it was. It glues it together a little bit. I think of this almost, it's basically a glue compressor just on this specific frequency range. Same thing up here. This one, I think each time basically for the most, well, attack's a little bit lower, but for the most of the time I generally have it a little bit looser because the higher up you get, I would say almost the more important obviously a transient is. You're going to hear it above 10 kilohertz a lot more than you would, a baseline transient. You might not even notice that sometimes depending on your system setup. So I hear this specifically on the hats, for sure. You hear the hats kind of cut through a little bit better when this is on. It's letting the transients kind of shine for their quick moment before getting lost in the mix, lost under the bass line, lost in, how compressed the song is basically. And then the top, very top, and this is my favorite. I do this all the time. This is what I think a lot of people neglect or maybe don't notice in like professionally mastered songs, is how hyper compressed the top end is and can be without sounding like complete shit. A lot of people will bitch, like they'll upload something to SoundCloud and be like, oh, my top end's gone. Well, it's because you had a thin, frail top end, and the way that their codec works, they're back to MP3 128, is it takes out any irrelevant information. So if it looks at a track and it says, all right, well, there's not a lot going on above 16 kilohertz, which 128 cuts off, I think, at 16 kilohertz, maybe 15, it basically just shaves it all off. But if you have that loud enough in context to the rest of the mix, the codec's smart enough to see, hey, there's some information up here that will be audible. So I'm going to cut a little less there, cut a little more somewhere else. And by doing that, it's not going to sound as good as a 320 or lossless version, but you're still keeping a lot of the high-end information that you wouldn't have before. But a lot of people don't look into that. And my way of kind of boosting the top end, keeping it, compressed is upward compression, basically. So what I'm doing is I have the threshold at negative 18 decibels. It varies from track to track, but for the most part, for this style of house, I keep it at 18. Sometimes 20 if there's too much top end, but in this case 18. And then range. So I'm going 5.1 decibels. So anything below this set level, 18 decibels in this range I've selected, anything below that is being boosted up to 5.1 decibels louder. That's almost twice the loudness. Technically, I think every 6 dBs is doubling loudness in theory, depending, of course, on the frequency that it's at. But that's the gist of it for the most part. So I'm almost doubling loudness of certain things that might be as low as almost the noise floor down here. The attack is super loose because I want those transients to cut through. I want to hear them shine. And then the release is pretty loose also because I want it to be kind of like a longer transient. I don't want to just hear it click. I want, a little more tail, a little more sustain on it. So this is with it and then without. And you can see it working. So this is not a night and day difference, probably. It's pretty noticeable to me, but I'm able, I'm looking at the track, I'm breaking it down bit by bit. But I would say this is a lot more important than people think it is to kind of getting clarity in that top end, even in hyper compressed music. At least for me, this is my workaround to kind of get that going. And if there's something I don't want cutting through here, then I just go in the mix and tweak it. So this is kind of just a preface, hey, I'm putting this over the whole master, see how it sounds. So I'll turn it on, turn it off, we'll see how this sounds. So it tightens up parts of the mix for sure. Not a night and day difference for two reasons. One, I'm not really doing a lot. 3 dBs, 3 decibels, 4. This one's kind of a lot, 5, but it's so high up the spectrum that it's not nearly as noticeable as if I did it in the bass line or low mids. I try my best to not overdo my low mids. I know someone who does, but I don't want to call him out. I don't want to call Kindred out, so I'm not going to say anything. So next, this isn't doing anything too crazy either. I have a couple channels going on, and that's about it. So this one, initially at least, we'll see what it does now. The gist of this was to kind of just catch some peaks. It's as tight as I can get it because it's the first compressor, so I want it to just get the tight peaks if it can, but I'm using the vintage limiter, so it's still kind of transparent, kind of loose, so whatever. I always do it like this for some reason. I just ended up using this workflow often, and I like it. So you see how it's basically catching every downbeat peak for sure, and a couple of the baseline transients, it's kind of ducking those a little bit. Not really crazy noticeable, but it's enough to see what's going on. And then the exciter, This does a lot of work, actually. Especially in the top end. So if I solo that, without and with, so there's probably an easier way to do this, but for now. It kind of reshapes it a little bit too. It takes some of what you're hearing and kind of reshapes it. I'm using a tube exciter, which is normally what I use for the higher end, and then when I get low, sometimes I'll do analog, I'll do retro, things like that. Obviously not using it at all on my sub bass. I don't want it there. I don't want to affect the sound because I have it sitting how I want it. Mid-range, I'm doing a little bit of retro, barely. Probably not even noticeable. The big thing for me about exciters, the biggest benefit, is if we look at the metering, you'll see how it actually widens the track. And that's a big reason why I use it, one, and then two, you get a little more clarity, at least in the top end. In these bands, I'm using it mostly for just like distortion, because if you distort everything a little bit, you get each sound's individual harmonics kind of added, blended in a little bit, and then you make the mix a little more muddy, which kind of makes it sound a little more tied together. So in this case, if I go from, it was at 1.1, so if I go from 0 to the extreme 100, we should see this really widen up, as you can see. Now, I don't want the audible sound of that, because that sounds horrible. But I use a little bit, try to be tasteful with it. It's very mild. You don't really hear it on individual sounds. But it's doing its job of slightly widening up that range. Same thing with this one. If I go from 0 to 100, this one's kind of limiting the sound, is what it sounds like to me. It's mild again. It's barely doing it. This is at 3.7. And it doesn't really widen it too much from where I had it at 2.7. But I do hear how everything sounds a little more flat. The transients are kind of reduced. That's the effect that one has. And then obviously I showed the top end. An extreme version of this, if I wanted, I can show. That's it. That's what we want, that perfect diamond. Yep. I do aim for that somewhat, but not literally like that. Not for genre like this either. So that's doing what it needs to do. Imager, nothing crazy here. Top end's being widened a little bit. I try to get it to sit at 0 at its most variated point, which would actually probably more accurately be these 8, but I'm afraid of some stuttering, but we'll find out. Well, you're not really listening anyway, it's kind of looking. So it's doing a little bit, and basically have it around 0 for the most part. In mono, nothing collapses. Or by that I mean nothing disappears when it's collapsed. So that's what I want. I'm happy with that. It's as wide as I can get it without causing noticeable phasing. And they do have an... Oh, what did I just do? Alright, and I got it reloaded after I was retarded. That's good to know. So, I forgot what I was doing. Oh, band. So we looked at the top band, kind of saw where it was. This one, I want it a little more narrow, of course. Which it is, slightly more narrow. And that's what I want. So, next band, basically same thing I'm looking at. This one obviously does not need to be nearly as wide. It's lower range, almost digging into the sub. My poor... Learn to freeze. Don't be like me, guys, please. So this one's pretty narrow. There's obviously width to it in the mix, and then I'm adding some slightly, but nothing crazy. And in the low end, it really does not matter. As long as there's no crazy phasing, which there's not. I cut the low end out of everything except for basically the sub bass, some impacts, the kick, but none of them play at the exact same time, so it shouldn't cause issues. And this is very narrow. And that's how I want it. It's not. Oh, fuck, hang on. Yeah, so the low end's basically exactly how I want it. I go to the start of the chorus. It's basically 100% mono. Even if I widen it all the way, it's still basically narrow because I already have it in the mix. The sub bass is mono, the kick is down the middle anyway. There's no really low end in it. So you're getting a little bit from the side somewhere, from the higher bass sounds. Those are pretty wide, but they're so quiet compared to everything else that it doesn't actually matter. And that's at 100, so where I had it, it was even lower. It's pretty narrow, so I don't like putting my sub 100% mono, because you do hear it. You do hear a little bit of the width in headphones. And a lot of professional tracks that I've seen, when I've referenced them at least, most of the time for these styles, you don't really have your sub pure mono. So I do a lot of referencing. I'll throw it in my DAW, throw on an imager, break it down by specific bands, kind of see what's going on. Most of the time it's fine, so nothing crazy there. And then unmute that, and then the maximizer, that's not doing too much. Just another 1.5 decibels. I'm basically pushing into 0. I'm already hitting 0, so I'm basically just squashing it even further. And if I take everything, there we go. Mono sounds the same. So I'm not losing really anything by converting, by pushing the mix to mono, and that's the most important part, is none of the major pieces should disappear. And in this case, they don't, thank God. And then Pro L2. This one's not doing a lot. Another 1.5 basically. I'm going to solo it so I can hear what's being added basically. So this is showing you the delta, the change from before and after. So it's pretty tight. I'm going after the transients again, getting a lot of click. But that's what I wanted. I wanted a tighter one. I actually did this. I did measure out basically the tempo into milliseconds, so I was able to use that value to kind of get where I wanted it to be. So tack, I'm using basically, I think it was a 64th note, give or take, I think 2 or 3 milliseconds. I did change it a little bit. And then the release I followed originally off of, I think a 32nd or a 16th, and from there I made it a little bit more narrow, a little bit tighter to get a slightly more loudness out of it without distorting. I have this set to -6. That's kind of what, in this case, I was referencing. I was like, yeah, if I hit -6, I'll be happy. After I was already at -4, so LUFS. So I'm using that. Oversampling is not on right now. the beautiful sound of overrunning. R.I.P. Yeah, so this isn't really doing anything crazy either. Even when I have it on, you see I have the look ahead tight so that it doesn't really screw with anything. The tighter it can get, the more transient, specific shape of the transient I'll be able to keep with the original sound. If you make your look ahead too long, it'll actually kind of curve the transient down. So the tighter you can get it, the better most of the time. But remember, the tighter it is, you're probably also going to want to have this at a more extreme level. Oh God, I didn't even have oversampling on. Imagine trying to play it with it on. It'd be a nightmare. I only render with it on. Attack release, I kind of went over that. Channel linking. So basically, in this case, if I had this boosted to 100, it's going to limit the left and the right exactly the same. Which I guess is okay, but sometimes you might have something peaking at 0 only on the left side and not quite hitting it on the right side. Well, what it's going to do is just duck everything, the left and the right, the same. It's going to have the same effect on both ends if I do that. So I keep this basically 100% independent. So if it's clipping only on the left, it's only going to limit the left side. The right side, in this case, is slightly affected by the characteristic on the opposite end, but not really enough to do anything. Then the release is just controlled by, basically, is it independent release or is it dependent release? So by separating this, I'm able to kind of do the same thing I'm doing with the transient delinking, where it's going to kind of just look at left and right as separate entities, almost separate mixes instead of grouped together. So I got a little more loudness out of this. But the main benefit of it is you keep a lot of the stereo imaging how you intended it in the mix. Otherwise, it would, if I kept it tied together, it would actually narrow the mix, because once I'm pushing closer to 0, since it's affecting the left and the right the same, it does this kind of a weird effect where it tries to push everything towards the center of the mix to be safe. I don't want that. I like wide mixes. I use a lot of stereo effects. I widen a lot of things. As you can see, I narrow things to make other things seem even wider. So there's a lot going on in that end. So that's basically what I did for mastering. Nothing too crazy in this song. I think I went over basically everything I wanted to, but I'll end it here because it is late and I went longer than I thought I would. But I think I got a lot, hopefully, shown. If anyone has any questions, of course, ask me in the comments, DM me on Discord, harass me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, something. If for some reason you have my phone number, hit me up there. But yeah, that's basically the gist of this song, nothing crazy. It's due in basically a day or two, so I'm going to render out the final version now and hope for the best, see if I get a legit release or not, or see what I get to do with this remix. So for now, that is goodbye. Thanks for watching. See ya.